Let me also talk to you about things closer to home, and particularly Julian Assange, because Joe Biden yesterday said that he was considering a request was actually comes from the Australian Premier Albanese to drop the prosecution of Julian Assange after judges ruled that the WikiLeaks founder could have grounds to appeal his extradition to the United States. Now, he's been charged with multiple counts of espionage back in he was charged in 2019, relating, of course, to events far long before then. He's been imprisoned in Belmarsh here. It's actually going to be 5 years as of today, as his extradition battle plays out. And that imprisonment in Belmarsh follows 7 years in the Ecuadorian Embassy, where he hid out over the prospect of being extradited to Sweden on charges of rape that were later dropped. Now, the defence from Julian Assange has always been that he was a publisher, that he's a journalist. He was exposing what we knew, were official documents that exposed illegal activity, criminal activity by the American government and other governments, and that he should have the protection, not just of the First Amendment in America, but the protection that journalists should have across the free world. What do you make of Joe Biden saying he is considering this request? Does that suggest to you that this is a real possibility and they just want this to kind of go away now?
Well, it was I have to say, I found that completely astonishing, because if you were going to expect any sort of breakthrough on the case of Julian Assange, the last place, personally, that I would expect it to come from was the White House. Yeah. But there we had President Biden saying that he was considering exactly that. And in a way, you could see that it makes sense of a kind, although you also have to be a bit careful about things that President Biden says, because it looked quite a sort of a spontaneous response. Yes. And it hasn't been completely clear, say, whether he completely understood the question.
No, this is the trouble, isn't it? Because he makes off-the-cuff remarks, and often his White House staff then have to say, no, that isn't actually the position. But, I mean, again, even if this does bring hope to the Assange case, do you think that he should be extradited to stand on charges in America?
I mean, personally, I don't think he should be extradited, because I think the Americans are actually trying to use charges to the effect that material he published endangered Americans and people working for America. That is hugely contentious, because his defense is that if there was, that he Assange personally, edited the material very carefully with advice to protect individuals, and that if there were any mistakes on this score, then it wasn't down to Julian Assange. I think the way that the Assange case is depicted varies so much, that there is, as it were, the journalistic constituency, but not the complete journalistic constituency, which says that extraditing Assange to America would endanger journalists everywhere. Yeah. And then there is the view that there are limits to journalism, and that what Assange was doing was not that. The latest hearing in the British courts was about whether Assange could appeal against the American extradition request. And the judges asked for assurances. It's been very, very strange, because they said they were reserving their judgment, and then they produced a judgment which wasn't really a judgment, and asked all the same questions that they'd asked for answers for in open court. And those were: we want undertakings from the United States that Assange will not face the death penalty, that he won't face extra charges, and we want clarity as to whether, as a foreign national, he will enjoy the protection of the First Amendment of the American Constitution on freedom of speech. All of those being quite important and significant. And it is possible that if what Biden said was correct, and is an indication of the way the wind is blowing, that some sort of compromise is being worked out between the Americans and the Australians, given that Assange is an Australian citizen.
It's going to be fascinating to watch how this plays out. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary Dejevsky there. Still with me is Philip Ingram. Now, you were shaking your head during some of this. It's a bit difficult. I don't think Julian Assange is a particularly likeable character. I think we can agree that. And I think we should never let that cloud our judgment on this. I think there was a certain recklessness, and there's certainly lots of people who worked with him, The Guardian, Washington Post, and they will say they were very unhappy about some of the things that he did and the way he worked, and they believe he was reckless and putting people's lives at risk. But it seems to me that I don't understand why an Australian citizen operating not in America should have any duty of care to American military operatives, and it can be accused of espionage. He wasn't on American soil. He was simply exposing wrongdoing. It was wrongdoing by the American government. I understand why the people he got the information from have been prosecuted, because they committed treason and they signed the Official Secrets Act in America. But he hadn't, and I don't really understand what he's being prosecuted for.
He exposed the wrongdoing in some of what he published. He then published a huge amount of material that was sensitive, and we heard described that he edited it. I saw a lot of that. I've read a lot of it, and I went, "Oh, that's easy to identify." The technical means by the way that was transmitted and therefore intercepted. That particular phrase will have come from an individual, and you could probably identify who it was by the way it was written. That conversation will have only happened between these two people, so you'll be able to identify who the agent.
And you're saying that people who wish those people wrong, I mean, that those people could have had their lives at risk.
Well, those people will have had their lives at risk, and people have been killed or imprisoned in their different countries over this. And this is where the lack of duty of care.
Is that a moral argument? And you can say, well, you're a bad person. But he didn't go and kill those people himself. Did he have a duty of care to those people?
As a journalist, and we know how much our editors make sure that we apply the rules and have a duty of care of everything that we put out to make sure that it's fair and it's balanced and all the rest of it. He didn't do that. Full stop. Underline.
You see, he didn't actually apply the journalistic rules, and yet it was right for us to know that
some of the stuff was right for us to know.
Because he basically put out a huge amount of it, which other journalists didn't want him to put out.
He put out everything. If he just concentrated on the bits that were right and proper that they came out because they held the Americans and others to account, fantastic.
Should he face spending the rest of his life behind bars because of what he did?
I think what he should face is a judicial process that will then put to bed...
Do you trust American? I don't trust American judicial processes.
Well,
I really don't. I don't think they have a proper justice system. They don't have
the justice system is too politicised. And there are problems with that, but then that's a completely different debate. Should we then let anyone be extradited to the United States for anything at any stage?
Well, kind of, because they don't really extradite people to our country, which I think I was against the European arrest warrant as well for that very same reason. Very interesting. We'll see what happens. Obviously, if there are any developments on that front, we'll bring them to you here at TalkTV.